There are a couple of questions that I get asked repeatedly, pretty much every time I put up a Malazan video. One of those is, who's your favorite character? Which I don't have an answer to. The other question is, who's your favorite duo of characters? Who I haven't had an answer to, but now I do. And it's not even close. Spoiler alert, it's T. Hull and Bug. Today we're talking about Midnight Tides, Book 5 in the Malazan Book of the Fallen. This series is amazing. Just fucking wonderful. Just blows your mind, blows any expectations you might have had for a series and what a series could do. Pretty much out of the water. It's kind of insane. I don't even have words, even though I say that, and now we're going to spend probably the next 20 minutes talking about it. But this is fabulous. Now, as always, spoiler warning for the video. Once I get this far into a series, I just go full spoilers. I don't even waste my time trying to do a spoiler-free section. I don't know why you're here on book 5 of a series if you're looking for a spoiler-free review. Also, I couldn't talk about anything without at least spoiling the previous book, so we just go full-on spoilers. So let's talk about Midnight Tides. Okay, like I said, this book was great, and I just have such a strange experience with these books every time I pick one up, because everybody always says it's their favorite. Like, this is the one series that does not have a universal consensus as to which one is the best. Every time I bring up a book, somebody says it's their favorite. So I'm always like, oh, I wonder why, and I get into it, and I'm like, I don't know if I'm enjoying this as much as I did the other ones, and I don't know, why would somebody say that this is their favorite? Then I get a little bit further in, and I'm like, oh, never mind. I get it. And then some of the books once are like really strange because they age kind of like fine wine. Some of them you finish them and you're like, that was good. That was a good book. I enjoyed myself. And the further you get away from it, the more you kind of ruminate on it, the more it kind of grows on you over time. That would be this. This one, not that this was bad. I finished this and I was like, man, that's great. And now that I'm about a week and a half out from it, whenever I finished it, I'm just like, man, that was really fucking good. Dead House Gates kind of did that to me, kind of grew on me over time. Whereas like some books like Memories of Ice, you just boom, the second you finish it, you're like, that was a banger, that was a 10, no questions, you know? Also, Malazan books take a minute to get into once you start reading them because it's always just so jarring because he takes you and he rips you away from everything that you've come to know, everything that you're even remotely comfortable with, and he throws you in somewhere like in the deep end of some new place with new characters, like just you're not prepared for, so it takes a little bit to kind of get your bearings, or at the very least get invested in the particular story that he's telling now, because the story that you were invested in, yeah, we'll pick that up some other time eventually. And I was ready for this one. I was legitimately excited to get to this one because I knew that we were going to a whole new continent. I knew that we were going to go to all new characters, essentially. And I knew that it would be like a flashback, to jump back in time to like the earliest book in the timeline of the series, essentially. So I knew what I was getting myself into. I knew I was ready. I was prepared for it. And it was still a little bit of a, okay, hold on, let me get my bearings. Let me get it together here. Let me kind of get a grasp on what's happening and try to get invested in this particular set of characters. And then I'm not even going to lie, I wasn't super excited for Troll Sengar to be the main character in this book, because if there was a section of House of Chains that I was least invested in, it would have been the Troll Sengar section. I don't know why. It was out of all of the different things that he was juggling, all the different irons he had in that fire, that was the one I was just the least invested in. So now they're like, okay, you get a whole book with Troll. And I'm like, well, we'll see how it goes, I guess. But then, of course, leave it to Steven to take a random character that you're probably not very invested in from the previous book, make him the highlight and the main focus of this book, and all of a sudden, you care. All of a sudden, you're like really invested in Troll and who he is and his family dynamics and everything that's happening with him. You know, suddenly you're extremely invested in a character that felt like a side character in the last book, and you really didn't give a Also, why does it constantly feel like Steven has something to prove? Like he doubles down on his character work or really refines the way that he's doing his character work. And it feels like it's almost in direct response to something that came before. Then he chooses to make all of book 1 of House of Chains about Karsa Orlong, essentially proving that all of his jumping and bouncing around isn't a crutch and he can write whatever the fuck he wants to write. Now in this book, it feels like he wants to prove that he can also write comedy. I mean, that's how it felt to me. Like legitimately the sections with T-Hole and Bug, and they are so first and foremost a buddy comedy, and the comedy is so front and center in those sections, and the antics and the ridiculous shit that they are getting up to and their conversation, just everything that's happening, everything that's said. The entire tone of those is just drastically different than anything else he's ever done. Now, I am aware that he has had comedy in these books up until now. It's kind of been peppered throughout, but this is by far the most dialed to 11, really just ridiculous antics taking front and center and just bombastic, ridiculous tone. And then this is actually one of the most balanced books that he has, as far as one chapter here, one chapter there, one chapter here, one chapter there. Whereas, before it's been that real scatter shot of characters, or maybe a full chapter of Karsa, and then this chapter will be scatter shot. This one was much more, we're going to focus on this set of characters, the Edur, then we're going to focus on the Letherii, then we're going to focus on Edur, and it felt extremely balanced in the way of how we just really one, then the other, then the other, then the other. But then we have this very serious tone over here with the Sengar and everything that's happening over there. And then we come over here to this ridiculous tone of the antics of T-Hole and Bug. And it did not feel jarring at any point to jump back and forth between the two, even though they were so starkly different. And it was so well done and so well integrated into the rest of the book and the story. I could not have been happier with it, and I think it was executed superbly well. I have nothing but compliments for Steven and his abilities and whatever the fuck he's doing here. But like I said, it just feels like he almost at every turn has something to prove with this book. All right, in this book, I'm going to do this, and I'm going to show you just what I can do with XYZ. Anyway, all of that aside, let's talk about the book itself. And Midnight Tides is essentially a tale of two peoples with two very different ways of thinking and existing, and then two separate sets of brothers. The Sengars and the Bedics. And just like the tone, they are mirror images of each other, yet completely opposite to each other. The Sengars are tight-knit together at all times. They are the brothers. They go out on a singular mission as a set. They are together. They are intertwined both narratively and like physically in their location. They are very close throughout the entirety of the story for the most part. Whereas on the flip side of that, the Bedics are all playing important parts in their side of the story. On the Letherii side, you've got the brother that's like the champion fighter for the emperor, or soon to be emperor, and you have the brother that is eventually going to end up kind of on the side of the Sengars over there. And then you have the bum that sleeps on his roof and wears badly made clothes from his manservant. Both of which, T-Hole and Bug, might just end up being more than they appear at first glance. But these brothers really don't seem to have anything to do with each other. They aren't close in nature, they aren't close in proximity, they aren't close, period. They are literally these satellites just revolving and rotating around the story on their side. Pretty much the polar opposite of the way the Sengars are presented on their side of the story. And I say that it takes a second to get into these stories, but it doesn't take that long, especially in this one, because it really kind of, as much as I didn't give much of a crap about a lot of the characters for a minute, it took me a minute to get into the characters, per the usual, but the plot was pretty gripping right off the bat, because I'm pretty excited. What is this mission out onto the ice? What is this sword, this strange thing that we have already seen be commanded to be forged by the crippled god himself? What are these weird creatures that are coming up out of the ground? Why do we keep flashing over to the crippled god in the entirety of his entire realm that he gets to control, which is a single tent? And all of the different dead characters, like the little girl Kettle, and I can't think of the woman's name who eventually gets the hole in her head. Like, there's just so much happening, and it's so fascinating. And it's just, like I said, the plot in this one was just so gripping that it just rips you through the entire book. Character comes later. Of course, you do get invested in the characters, but plot, man. Oh, Anyway, speaking of the plot, we start with the prologue and the Edurs betraying the Andi. This then leads into the forging of this mysterious blade, and then we lead directly into basically the brothers being sent out on the mission to find the blade. And they're sent out to get the blade and bring it back to the Warlock King, but of course that's not going to happen because it's going to attach itself to one of the brothers, and then they won't be able to get it back from him. And of course it's going to go to Rulad, the youngest and the weakest, the most insecure, the most scrutinized, the unblooded one, the one with all of the insecurities that are just going to make him ripe to be manipulated by the crippled god and make him the most volatile and dangerous when he gets it. And then the journey that's going to happen from there to him becoming the new emperor of this entire continent is fucking insane. From the death to the ritual that he has to go through in death to the coins to the... everything is wild. The descriptions of him dying and then coming back to life, just the descriptions of him, like his head snapping back into place while he screams and wails in like the middle of battle, is just haunting in the way that it is described, in the way that it happens. And then he comes back a little bit less sane every time he comes back. And like I said, he was by far the most volatile of the entire group before this ever happened to him, simply because of the dynamics of the family situation that he was in and his insecurities, because he just couldn't quite seem to measure up as an Edur. And then every step of the way, the crippled god's just whispering in his ear, making sure that whatever he wants to happen is what's happening. Everything about it is just so good and just so well executed. I can't say enough. Not to mention that while all of this is happening, you got Udanas over here being attached by a shadow wraith of a Tiste Edur, something. I don't know, but it's just, everything about it is just so amazingly investing and gripping. I love everything about it. And that's just the Edur side of the story. That's not even to mention the Letherii side, where everything that, or Letherii, I don't know, where everything over there is, you know, the humans, and they're prepping for these peace talks, and they're going to go into these peace conversations with the Edur, which while they're preparing for their king to be crowned as an emperor, because they have this prophecy that this is the coming of the emperor of the continent, which they are correct. They are just severely misreading their prophecy. This is also the section with my favorite of all favorites as far as duos of characters goes, T-Hull and Bug. And it is just, oh my God, they're just the ridiculous antics, like I said, of these two, and they're bouncing around, and this guy sleeping on his roof, and it's just so insane. And Bug makes his clothes, and they look like bums. I mean, they literally have no food. Most of the time they're surviving on scraps. And then later you'll find out that T-Hull makes these weird random conversations about a restaurant. And have you ever been there? No, I'd have never been there, but I own it. And then we find out he owns something else. And then all of this culminates later in the book when we hear Bryce talking about his brother T-Hull, and he pretty much describes him and explains him as maybe the smartest and wealthiest man in all of Letherii. Then there's Bug, his manservant, on the other hand, who seems just kind of silly and dumb and not very good at making clothes. And then he gets upset when people comment on how badly made his clothes are, just for him to show up and start talking to the little dead girl Kettle, and very quickly we realize he's nowhere near as dumb as he appears to be when he's with T-Hall, and he just might be more special than we thought. Which this then, of course, slowly grows and evolves into him being revealed not only to be more than we thought that he was at the beginning of the book, he's a f***ing elder god. Are you for real? Like, this is just, it's wild. And then at the end of the book, I know I'm all over the place, and then at the end of the book, T-Hall finds out who he really is, and he threatens to erase his memory. But of course, at the end of the day, he couldn't do it, and they just go on living life as usual, with T-Hall treating him just like he's an everyday manservant, and they just kind of go on about their business. Oh my God, it's so good. It's wonderful. That's not to skip over the insane showdown that's going to happen at the end of this book between Halbedic and Rulad, and he literally just severs all of his tendons, making him basically this useless pile because he knows better than to kill him, because he's now at this point in the book aware of what would happen if he did, and then this is going to force a scene where both Fear and Sangar have the opportunity to kill him in order to bring him back so that their side can keep pushing forward and keep fighting, and neither Fear nor Sangar has the will or the desire to kill him and bring their brother back. They both just let him lay there like that because they know that to do nothing is, in this particular situation, is the lesser of two evils. But then when he does ultimately get killed and come back, and then he ends up being crowned emperor, when it comes down to the wire, Fear walks away and Trull stays, which is a complete flip of the way they've been acting the entire book, because up until this point, Fear has been the one brother to stand by his Rulad's side, doing what must be done as the brother, as the war leader for the Edurs, and Trull has been questioning and talking down and talking shit. The whole book, got himself in trouble multiple times for the shit that's coming out of his mouth. Fear slapped him down a couple of different times for the shit that was coming out of his mouth about the leader, their emperor, their king, Rulad. And then at the end of the day, when push comes to shove and Rulad actually wins the throne, Fear can't do it. He has to turn his back. He walks away. He even vows to come back and take down the tyranny that was born this day or something. I forget how he words it. Basically, I'm going to come and I'm going to take care of Rulad. While Trull, then the one who's been talking all the mad shit the whole book, can't bring himself to turn his back on family, can't bring himself to turn his back on his brother, and he stays behind to attempt to save him or save something of his brother. He just can't seem to do it. So really, what is loyalty and loyalty to family, and where is the line, and what is the appropriate way of approaching it between these two brothers, because they have very different ways of approaching it. Just the conversations around family and the ties and the bonds that tie them together and how they are bonded and how they live and react and engage with each other through those bonds is not only between Trull and Fear, but then also between the Bedics and the Sengars, and just all of it, the amount of discussions that he is having in a single book. And that's just getting into the family dynamic, not to mention everything else that's happening all at the same time, and all the conversations about, power and the corruption of the sword and the corruption of the crippled god and the diminishing sanity of the emperor while he's taking over, the misreading of the prophecies. Just the insane amount of things that are happening in one single book in a Malazan book is fucking insane. And I haven't even touched on Saren Pedic or Iron Bars or a whole bunch of other shit that's going on in this book. And I'm not gonna, because I don't have time. This is already probably the longest Malazan video I've made so far. Anyway, way to introduce a whole new continent, a whole new people, the Emperor of the Letherii, who is at once terrifying and utterly tragic. And also how does this play into the larger story? How is this going to fit into everything else that's been going on over in Rujistan and over in Raraku? And just how does all of this fit into the larger scheme of things? I cannot wait to get to the next book. Not only do I read these books faster than normal books because I just can't get myself to stop. I literally can't stop once I get moving on this one of these books. Then once I do stop, it's hard to wait to the next month to pick up the next book. I just want to keep going. Like, that driving force to get through them is just so powerful. It's really hard to hold back sometimes. Anyway, I'm just dying to know what happens next. These books are fucking amazing. This one is going to get a 10. It is just it's that good. It's a perfect 5-star book if that's how you want to look at it. I don't care. Now, this is the only other book in the series to get a 10 is Memories of Ice. And I will, spoiler alert right now, I will just tell you, this is no Memories of Ice. I will say that one is better, I think. But, you know what? It's a 10 out of 10. I think it's just amazing. I loved it. As always, everybody, the link for my Patreon's in the description below. The link for my Discord's in the description below. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you next time.